Welcome to another exciting episode of Web Development with Dr. J. Today, we're going to take the HTML projects that we worked on before, and we're actually going to add some CSS or styles to them. So in these examples, we'll be adding cascading styling sheets to the 10 HTML projects in the previous video, but if you want to start fresh with the HTML files before the CSS is added, you can find those on the GitHub repository in the description below. Often, we say that if HTML is the nouns, CSS represents the adjectives. In other words, while the HTML provides the content and general structure, CSS adds the descriptions, color, positions, borders, shading, and much more. So let's learn about CSS. Got a little image for you for a moment here. All right, there we go. Trusty old Paint will do okay, I suppose. All right, so right here, you can see that we have a selector and then property value. So this is a rule set, selector, and then curly braces right here is the body of that, that rule set. You've got the selector here. This is a general selector, and then we see property, value. So these are key value or property value attribute values that you will see. So if we want to make all paragraph elements blue, for example, this is a specific example, whereas this one's more just a general form. You can say P, which we know is the name of the paragraph tag in HTML. And then inside the body, one of these properties that we can modify is the color property. So we put that on the left with a colon, and then blue, and then semicolon. If we wanted to do multiple things, we could put those on multiple lines as well. So we should become familiar with different selector types. We're not going to use all of them in this lecture. In these examples, but you should at least be aware of them. So these are the primary ones you'll be aware of. In general, we have the selector types element selector, which target all elements of a given type. For example, H1, and instead of the P here, we could put H1, but P is also an element selector, and that would affect all H1 tags. You can also target elements with a specific class attributes. So for example, if you put dot card, that would affect anything, divs or paragraphs or anything that has class equal to card as one of the attributes, as we see right down there. So the dot is what makes it so that we know that this is a class selector. All right. So we've also got ID selectors that targets a single element by its ID. So it should be unique. You're not really supposed to use the same ID in multiple elements, that is. But if it has the ID equal to main-header, then that will affect the thing with that ID. Universal selector applies styles to all elements. So if you put star, just the asterisk, margin is 0, that would reset all the margins on all the tags. Okay, moving forward, we also have some more specificity here. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And we have attribute and pseudo selectors. So you might have, for example, an attribute selector, and that would look like this. So it goes a little bit more specific. So input, that would be for any input element. And if the type of that input element is text, it will only affect those. Okay, so target input elements only of the specific type that has text. But it could be like radio buttons or checkboxes or other things. Pseudo classes are things like, they're not really classes that you define, but they are specific states of being. For example, when you hover over an anchor tag, you use the colon to represent that. So a : hover, that means when you're hovering over the particular anchor tag or link, a hyperlink, or thing that's affected by that anchor tag, it will style the element when the condition is met. So that's what a pseudo class does. Pseudo elements use 2 colons instead of 1 like the pseudo class does. And these are not used really in our examples that we're going to do today, but these target parts of an element. For example, if you want the first line of text to be different, say for all paragraphs, you could say P : first line. All right, we've also got combinators. This has to do with relationships between elements. So if you want to have all section elements inside of main, you would put main space section. So that means main, it's looking at main and then looking for section elements within main. That is a descendant. Okay. Now, if you want a direct child, so descendant means it could be a child, but it could be lower, like grandchildren type level. So an element within an element within an element, etc. We don't use this in these particular lectures in this example, but it's good to know about this. So the child element would look like this. So UL, child LI. So that would target only immediate children. It would look for all ULs in this class and look for all of the LIs within them and then do something to those. Adjacent sibling, you use the plus symbol. That means, let me see if I put like P plus div, it would style all divs that are adjacent to the paragraphs. And then general sibling, that would mean any sibling on either side. It could be 2 siblings down. It's just all siblings. All right. Pretty cool. And the other thing we need to know for going into the actual examples is about this CSS box model. Okay. This beautiful little diagram I made. Every HTML element is treated as a box, just like this. With properties like padding, which is the space inside the box. Okay, so you've got the padding. Sorry about that. I had to pause the video and make a little change here, which I'll explain in a second. So you've got the padding, which is the space inside the box. So the border is right here. Okay, it was a little misleading the way I had it labeled here. This is just showing maybe the start of other elements right here. But the border is this thing. So it's right where we... right outside the padding, you've got the content inside the padding and then the border, then you have a margin. So the margin is space outside the box representing the element, and it's basically the space between this element and other elements. Okay, so the padding is space within the border, but between the content and the border. So that space is controlled by padding. This is the border, margins there, and then the actual content goes in the content part. You could also add things like shadows. So box shadow is another thing that you can add that would add visual depth to elements. Transitions, that creates animated effects without the use of JavaScript. And you also have things like response widths. So when we get into responsive web design and perhaps other lectures, you'll find that having these fluid layouts where you have a flexible response width, or responsive width rather, for example, if you make it 100%, that would make the element expand to the entire container wherever you are. All right, so let's dive in a little bit and get to these actual projects. What I did is I created a whole new folder, and I copied and pasted all of the images and the HTML files from the other HTML exercises folder, so we could have something fresh to start on. But this one will end up having CSS added. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have to create a styles folder. So I'm going to create a new folder and then styles. And we're going to start, just like we did before, with the personal homepage. So the personal homepage is this one. All right, personal homepage. And I'm going to, in the styles, to actually create, although this isn't necessary, just to keep it organized, I'm going to name it the same thing. So personal homepage.css, though, for cascading style sheets. Now, you could name it anything. You could name it style, you could name it horse, it doesn't matter, whatever makes most sense. Now, before we do that and actually write some code in here, I'm going to go over here and I have to link this HTML file to the styles. So just like in some of the image examples we did before, I'm going to add a link in this header right here. Now I just pasted it just to save some typing, but you'll see that link rel, okay, is style sheet. So we're saying what are we linking into here? And then href, just like anchor tags have href for locations, I'm telling it the location of the CSS file. Now remember, we're looking relative to the HTML file itself, and we have to see what are the HTML file's siblings. And since this CSS file is in a folder, the folder is my sibling, so I write that first. Okay? In other words, I live in the same folder myself as the styles folder, which is a subfolder. Same thing I did with images before. And then you say styles slash, and then you say what lives under there. So this is kind of like my nephew or niece. All right, so my sibling's child. Now we're going to actually add the CSS. So right now, if I look at the personal homepage, open it with the live server, it's pretty boring and bland. Not anything interesting, really. We're going to try to add a little bit more interest using CSS. And this is really what you should do, is you should use CSS to do the styling. So the first thing you want to do, I won't always type these. We'll do a little bit of copy pasting. But for this one, it's good to probably just give it a start. So margin is 0. Padding is 0. We could put units on these, like pixels or what have you, but it doesn't really matter if they're 0. If 0 means 0. The other thing we could do, box sizing. We'll talk about some of these in a little bit. But this basically just resets everything. Okay, that's called a basic reset. Now, if we want to style the body itself, this is the body. That's our specific rule set. It's a set of rules, okay? And each rule has a property and value. So font family, we'll say what fonts are we using. Now, this one we can have multiple values. For example, I want Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif. Now, what this means is if the computer you are on, the browser that you're in, has Arial font, which is pretty well available, if it has that font, it'll use that one. If it cannot find that font, it will try Helvetica. If it can't find that one, it'll look for any good sans serif font. And if that one doesn't exist, it'll just go for a default system font. Line height, 1.6, just to add a little bit more spacing. Background color, we're going to do number F4, F4, F4. Now, we can actually, this is a hexadecimal value representing the color, and it actually gives you the amount of red, the amount of green, and the amount of blue. And in this case, it's the same each way. So that will end up giving us kind of a grayish, lightish grayish color. If we ran it right now, or well, I think I closed it, so we need to rerun it again. If I show it right now, you may or may not be able to see it, but this is a very, very light gray at this point. So this is going to actually update it. All right, next thing, we're going to change the color of the font. Now, this is actually shortcut. This is a shortcut for, by the way, the only comments that work in CSS are these. You can't use 2 forward slashes. You have to use the multi-line comment, even if it's a single line. But this is actually short. If all of them are the same, you can actually, like 333333. So that's also going to give us a gray. In this case, it's a darker gray. We're not in this lecture going over how hexadecimal values work really, but we do have built-in color modification that we can do here if we prefer different colors or whatever, we can actually do that, right? So you'll see it'll actually change the colors for me, but I'm going to keep it to 333. And then padding. Again, padding 20 pixels. We do put the units in this case. The padding is the space between our content within the body, or the body itself. We have the body and then space around it. So between that and other elements. So just 20 pixels between the body and its window, essentially. The next thing we're going to do, since we have styled the body, we also have header and main and sections and all this other stuff that we might want to style or make look different. So let's see what that looks like. Let's do header styles. So header, I'm going to make the background color to 007 ACC. And we can see that that's kind of a bluish color, right? So we go here, we can see it's a blue. Across the top, you can actually see what the color is, 007 ACC. So if we change it, you can actually see that. And we can change this color over here to actually change the actual hue. But the color we have in there is 007 ACC. Okay, and the color property, background color is the background color. The color property is the font color, okay, or the text color. That's white. We're going to make the padding 20 for this. Border radius. Now this one's going to be cool because this actually defines how circular the edges around a particular system or a particular element is. And then margin, we can specify margin like we did up here, and it affects all 4 sides. Right here, it should set them all back to 0. But you can also say margin hyphen bottom altogether, and that will only affect the bottom margin. So we're going to set that to 20 pixels. And then header H1, if you recall, that is the descendant. So font size is 2 ems. An M is a unit of measure for font size, and it literally is the width of an M in whatever font we're in. That's basically what it generally tends to mean. And then margin bottom will make the margin not quite as heavy on that one. And then we might want to do some section styling. So let's do main section. So any section within main, we're going to make the background color white. We're going to make the padding 15 pixels, 20 pixels. And if I put 2 values here, if we put 1 value, it would go on all 4 sides. But this is, even though we could put, padding top, padding bottom, padding right, padding left, if we just do it on 1 line, which is totally acceptable, if you have more than 1 value, it splits it up differently. So if you put 1 value, it's on all 4 sides, just like we had up here with margin. Margin and padding work the same way in that respect. If you put 2 values like we have here, 15 pixels, then 20 pixels, what this means is the padding on the top and the bottom, okay, so top and bottom are 15 pixels, and then left and right are 20 pixels. Okay, that's what that means. Now, if we had 3 values, you can do that. So if I put 10 pixels, 15 pixels, 20 pixels, that would mean the top is 10, the left and right are 15, and then the bottom's 20. So when you have 3 values, the one in the center means left and right. The one on either side is 10 pixels, 20 pixels. And then if you have all 4 values, like if I put padding 5 pixels, 10 pixels, 15 pixels, 20 pixels, like all 4 on the same line, that actually goes from top, right, bottom, left. I know that's a little confusing, but a good way to remember it, okay, if I had padding like this, say 5 pixels, 10 pixels, 15 pixels, 20 pixels, for 4, for 4 values, it's TRBL. So it looks like it spells trouble, right? So if you have trouble remembering it, now you know. Okay, so I'm actually going to do that because it's getting confused with the comment. But there you go. So that's TRBL. So top, right, bottom, and left. That goes for padding. That goes for margins. You could do it with either of those. Or you can use the individual components if you need to. The more specific you get, it overrides it. So if I did padding and I put 15 pixels, 20 pixels, that affects top, bottom, left, right. And later on, if I put padding hyphen bottom is 50 pixels, that'll override the previous one. Okay, pretty good. Now, let me see here. Okay, so we got the main section, we've got the padding, we've got border radius. We're going to make that 8 pixels. Margin bottom, just the bottom is 20 pixels. And then we're going to make a box shadow. So that's going to make it look like it's popping. So I'll explain these in just a second. This is a little bit complicated, or it looks complicated, but it's not really. Okay, semicolon on that one. I think that's all I've got on that one. So what do all these values do? Okay, well, the first one, 0, that's the horizontal offset. The second one is vertical offset, and the third is blur radius. So we'll get to the fourth one in a minute. But first value is horizontal offset, so that means left, right. So here it's 0, so that means there's no sideways shadow. The vertical offset, which is up and down, the shadow appears 2 pixels below the element. That's what this 2 pixels. If you put negative 2 pixels, it'd be 2 pixels above the element. All right. And then finally, we've got 5, blur radius. That's how soft or spread out the shadow is. So the larger that value, the blurrier it looks. And then you've got RGBA. Now we could put a hex value here, but this is an alternative. Red, green, blue, and then alpha value. What this means is that it's black because of 000, but it has 10% opacity. Okay, that makes it a transparent grayish color is what the actual effect will be. So overall, what this is going to do is create a subtle kind of soft gray shadow directly underneath the element because of that vertical offset with no horizontal movement and a light blur that fades out. So it gives kind of a nice lifted look, which is modern and minimal. All right. So let me get there. All right, now we're going to style H2s. Okay. The color is 007ACC. We've seen that before. That's our little blue color. Margin bottom is 10 pixels. Okay, and remember margin is outside the border. Even if we don't have a border specified, it's outside what would be the border. So content between the content and the border, it's padding. And then outside the bordering, between your element and another element's border, that is the margin. Okay, so that's all we need for H2. And now we're going to style a quote. Since we have a block quote in this particular one here, we can style that as well. Now you can pick and choose what you want to style as long as it makes it look the way you want it. But in this case, we're going to do the block quote. We're going to say font style is italic. The color is 555. So again, that is equivalent. It's a gray, but it's equivalent to 555555 because it's a shortcut. Margin left is 20 pixels, not 200. It's going to be quite big. Border left is 4 pixels, solid, and then 007 ACC. Okay, so it's a solid border, 4 pixels in width, and it's going to be that bluish color. And then padding left, 10 pixels. Okay, and then our hobbies list, which is inside of here in the unordered element, right? Or unordered list, rather. The UL, list style type, square. Now, you don't have to memorize all of these. I would say to get used to them, and once you start using them over and over again, you will just memorize them just basically from using them. Okay, padding left is 20 pixels. But some of them are a little more esoteric. You definitely should know color and background color and font size and padding and margin, pretty much, and font family, things like that. I would say try to memorize those, at least right off the bat when you're first learning. Memorize the margin, padding, font family, background color, what are those? Padding, what are the formats, margins, and the fact that you can add on these things like margin bottom, margin top, and things like that. Font size as well. Let's see what else. I think I said color already. Font style, another one you should probably memorize as well, like right off the bat, and work on that. Others will come as you use them, and then some you have to look up. Sometimes you may not know what you're supposed to use. Even for professionals, there's hundreds of them. So text align is center for the footer. Font size is 0.9 ems, so it's a smaller font. Color, again, this is a shortcut, 666. And then margin top, 40 pixels. All right, so going over some of these, just to be clear, I think it probably would make more sense if we just looked at the page now to see what it... oh, it's an edge, that's right. So this is what it looks like now. Okay, it's been refreshed. So you got a lot of cool stuff here. You got these, the margins here are what makes it look like we have a bunch of cards on this, basically, different segments of it. So with relatively little code, we actually have a pretty sophisticated look, which is very, very nice. Okay, let's minimize that. Now, a couple things to go over. You've got the star up here. That is the universal selector that resets the margin and padding across all the elements for consistency. That's how we're using it. The body, that'll set the global font, line spacing, background color, and things like that. For the header, we're applying a background color, text color, spacing, and rounded corners. So if you did not have, say, border radius, I'm going to cut that out just for a second here, and then we're going to look at it. Okay. You'll notice that it is not rounded, okay? And then if I go back here and put it back in, it is, in fact, once again, rounded. So you can see it's kind of rounded around the sides here, right? So I'm zooming in a little bit so you can see that rounding right there. All right, pretty good. Oops. Other things, we have the main section. You've got the header H1. I guess we should probably talk about that. Header H1 increases the main title's font size and adds spacing below it. Right, that's our margin. And the font size being 2M means it's going to be larger font. It's essentially twice. The M's in this font size are twice the size of the default. Okay, so 2M is essentially 200%. The main section, we're adding padding, a white background color, rounded corners with the border radius. You are also adding a subtle shadow for the card-like appearance, which is, so this means all the sections in this are going to have that card-like appearance, which is why we have this one, this one, this one, this one. I'm sorry, not the header. The header was separate, but this one, and this one all have this kind of card-like appearance, right? Almost like part of an accordion or something. We have H2. We give that the color blue as the font color, and the margin, kind of a heavier margin or lighter margin than what we've been using, but still 10 pixels. The block quote styles it with italics, a colored border, and left padding to visually set it apart. So when we get to this quote, you see that right there? It's got a left border right there, but the other borders are not colored in. So this is really cool, right? So we could put a bunch of quotes on here or whatever we want, really. UL adds padding and changes the bullet type to square instead of the circles. So right here, it's kind of hard to see. I'll zoom in just a little bit, but you can see that these are actually squares instead of the regular bullet points. Alrighty. And of course we got the footer. That centers the footer and uses a smaller muted font. So it's a gray font instead of our very, very, obvious other fonts that we have on here. So it's right down here. It kind of goes well with the very light gray background, but we got a slightly darker gray here, but it doesn't detract from the rest of the web page. Okay, pretty cool. Excellent. So now, with that one done, we're going to move on to the next one. The next one is the Simple Resume website. So we're going to take care of this one. This one right away, again, the styles, I'm going to create a new file in styles called simpleresume.css. And again, at any point you can pause the video and follow along or copy the code down. I'll make sure that you have access to it through GitHub as well. But if you want to follow along when I do some copy pasting and things like that, that's fine too, but you might have to pause the video or something like that. So, all right, let's give this a shot. Okay, now that we have the file, let me see here. We are working with Simple Resume, and I'm going to copy over the link, okay, right here. So it links to styles/Simple Resume. All right, and if I go to simpleresume.css, I will note that there is a lot of code, so I'm just going to copy paste that and we'll go over it just to keep me from having to type it. I guess you're out of luck if you don't download it from the GitHub, or if you want to practice, I do recommend actually copying it with your hands because it gives you better muscle memory as well. All right, so we've got quite a lot going on here. We do the reset again like we did before. Other things are the body, of course, that we're changing the font to Georgia this time if it's available, and a serif font if not. We have background color is fa. So that's kind of a lighter grayish color. It's very, very light gray. And then we have 222, which is a much darker gray for the font color. The line height is 1.6 and padding is 20. The header itself has another rounding. It's not quite as profound as the 8 pixels from before. We've got a 20 pixel padding, white font, and then 444 dark gray for the background color. We've got header H1. This time we've got 2.2 Ms, a 5 pixel margin bottom for the H1s. And then in the header, any paragraphs just has, we set that back to make sure that just to make sure it's using 1 M. The main section, it's white, of course, and we add left border. Oops, sorry. We add a left border that's 4 pixels, and it has it's solid. So you could put dashed here if you wanted to change it up or something like that. But there are several keywords you can use. And 444 is kind of a darker gray. Padding and margin, we already know those. And then our border radius and our box shadow kind of add that depth feel to it. All right, H2 has a kind of a grayish color, margin bottom, and then a font size 1.4, a little bit bigger than the default, almost about 40% bigger, right? Or exactly 40% bigger. The unordered list, 20 pixel padding, and this time we are making the list style disks, okay? The LIs are now adding vertical spacing between the list entries. So any of the list items are going to have this 5 pixel on their bottom, extra space. And then, of course, footer. That will center and tone down the footer content for less visual weight. And if we show this with Live Server, we see it like this, right? So the rounding isn't quite as extreme. This one's a different font. So this one's using a serif font, which serif, if we kind of zoom in here, you'll notice it has these little tiny ornaments on the end. So like little, instead of just being a straight J right here, it's got this ornamentation on that and on the H, on the B near the top. It kind of flails out. Those are called ornaments. That's a serif font. Sans serif means without serif, or without these little extra special things. So also the flat bottoms on things like the L and the feet of the N and things like that, those all count as a serif. Okay, as serifs. All right, so far so good, right? Okay, if you need to pause the video and look over this, that's good. Whatever you need. Although I would recommend downloading the code, and you can even open that in another, another screen, another monitor, another window even, just window, and then copy it that way. Okay? What's the third one? The third one is the contact form. So let's find it. Contact form is this one. I'm going to right-click here, go to New File. I'm going to use the same name, contactform.css. And of course, we're going to link this. And at this point, the contact form, if I open with Live Server here, not very pretty or particularly interesting visually. Not much to do. So we're going to make it a little bit more visually interesting using CSS. All right, so now I'm going to copy from my notes our CSS here, and we're going to look at it more carefully because there's some new stuff. So of course we're doing a reset on the margins and the paddings. Now, the reason we do this, you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, why are we even doing that? It's to prevent and to reduce cross-browser differences, because different browsers sometimes implement different margins and paddings through the default style sheet, essentially. So we're resetting all that, and we're overriding it here. So here the font family is Sego UI, and then sans serif if it can't find that. So we've got a white background color, the kind of a darker gray and padding. The heading, as normal, we're adding a radius. That's a common thing to do. We've got the header. We also have forms now. So this one has a form in it, which we talked about through HTML before, but this time we can actually style the form, the section within the form. So we've got white for the background color, 20 padding, a border radius of 6, and then this box shadow. So the vertical or horizontal and vertical, and then this blur radius, and then this 0.1 transparency right here. Okay, so, all right, some new stuff would be label. So we had seen that before, what labels are for. This is actually useful for accessibility, I believe, as I mentioned before. So it helps screen readers and things like that. So it lets it know that this input is associated with this label, right? So it goes for the name here. And we can style those too. So when it's not, when we want the label to look different, we can put display block, and that would make each label stand out and align properly with the above script. So the label display block makes it go on its own line. Margin top adds 10 pixels to its top, makes the font weight bold. So font style would be something like italics. Font weight is how thick the font is. So once you have a font, how thick is it essentially? And you can put that, so bold. Now this down here, this input type and all this, basically means that all of the inputs that are texts, okay, and then we put a comma to separate them. So this means independently, any input that is of type text, also any input that is of type email, also any text area. So that'll look in the HTML for anything that is a text area that has a text type like these two, or that has an email type like this one. So it'll just affect those three. And it'll make the width 100% of its container. It makes the padding 10 pixels, margin top and bottom are 5 and 15. Gives it a light border, very, very light border with a solid 1 pixel. It's a very, very thin border as well, with a very, very small rounding on the corners with 4 pixels and then the font size of 1em. Separately, we are changing this here. We're taking the submit button, okay, that's in the form, which is this thing, and we're saying we want to style the submit button, and if there were others, it would style those, but there's only one submit button in this case, giving it a darker background, darker blue background, making it white, setting the border to none, so that removes the default button border. Default button border and the boots with the fur. No? Okay. So padding 10 pixels, 20 pixels, that's the size of the button padding. And so basically the reason that controls the size of the button is because you have content, which is the text inside the button, and then the border of the button, which we're not showing, it still has a border between the content and that is the padding. So you're making the top and bottom 10 pixels and then left and right 20. You're adding a border radius, so we're changing the button defaults and making it 4 pixels. When you go over the button, we're making it so that the cursor now shows as a pointer, okay, to make sure that it shows as a pointer. And then font size is 1em. Later on, we're actually using a combination of the attribute selector right here, which tells it it's an element that's an input which has attribute type is submit, and the pseudo class selector hover. So if it's a submit button and you are hovering over it, we shift the color slightly when they hover on it. So it gives it kind of a glowing effect, or a more glowy effect, so you can tell you're hovering over it. And of course the font, the footer rather, down here. All right, the contact form, we're going to show that in live server. I'm going to close the other one. So there we go. Now, if I hover over this button, you can see that it's changing color every time I hover over it. It goes from this really dark blue that kind of looks like the top to the one that it's showing now when I hover over it. Right? Pretty cool. Right? Lots of good spacing, rounded corners here. If I make it smaller, it does respond fairly well, even by default. So it probably should look decent on most reasonable sized devices, even though we're not using yet responsive web design, which we'll talk about at a different lecture. And that's what we've got. Awesome. So that's the contact form. Now, the next thing up, our fourth example, is favorite recipes. So remember our lovely favorite recipes page, which if you remember, we can open with live server here. Looks like this, right? Pretty cool, got some nice pictures in it, but it's very bland and it's very, very plain. We don't want them to think our food is bland, do we? So I'm going to put a style in here, style page. I'm going to call it favorite recipes.css and save that. I'm going to go over here and we're going to put the link rel equals style sheet, and with the href, styles/favorite recipes. Okay, again, I would recommend the first several times you do this, and even every once in a while as you learn, that even if you're following along with the examples I'm doing, or you're looking at the GitHub code that you downloaded, that you actually type this out manually. Again, the reason I'm doing it is for the sake of time, but even though I've been dealing with this technology for years, When I initially make it, I'm obviously typing out a bunch of it. But even if I had a different source and I was copying and pasting stuff all over the place, I would still force myself, like if I had a learning reference or something, I would still force myself to type it out, or at least large portions of it, so that my muscle memory doesn't go away and my actual memory doesn't go away and I don't forget, how to do things, even though I've been using it forever. Even if I'm trying to be as efficient as possible, I still don't want to lose any of the skills that I've gained or knowledge that I know of. So if you do that, if I went 10 years with ever actually typing it or something, or not typing it properly, I would forget things. Okay, looking at it, you learn some of it, but typing it out, you learn it better. All right, so favorite recipes, kind of a boring page, as we saw before. But now, if I look in here, you'll see that this is a little bit more interesting, isn't it? Right? We've got rounded borders, it looks like, on the images, John Doe's recipe collection. Everything looks pretty cool, right? Now let's see, how did we make that happen? All right, so we do the reset, and you're all experts at the body stuff right now. We're making a warm off-white color, and we're saying that the trebuchet is the font we're using, and then sans serif if you can't find that, using certain colors. Kind of an orange for the background color of the header, which we saw up here, right? And it is using trebuchet font as the default. And we've got a white colored font in that border, because black may or may not be good depending on what you're doing. Halloween page may be good, depending on what you make the background. Sometimes if you make it a really dark gray and then you try to use black font, that's never going to work because you can't read it. We got the H1s. You've got the sections styled. This is our consistent kind of a card layout. I'm doing this a lot with the card layouts. It's not the only way to do a web page, but it's very, very common nowadays to do kind of a card layout. Now, the only reason it looks like this is coming out of the page a little bit is because of the shadow. So that shadow, box shadow at the bottom, and the rounded borders are why we see what we're seeing. Okay, so that's called a card layout. Now, image. So we hadn't really styled image before, so we're displaying it as a block, so that prevents inline spacing. Margin bottom and border radius, so that makes it kind of rounded on the corners, but it's a fairly soft round. It's not very, very extreme. If we put like 16 or 26 or 56, it would be a very, very different story. Okay. In fact, if I put, just to show you, if I put like 56, I don't know what this is going to do. It's very, very extreme, right? But maybe that's what you're looking for, and that's okay too. But in this case, just 6 pixels, very subtle, right? Very, very light rounding on the corners. Just makes it not look like you just kind of, pasted an image on the page. It's just nice. L and LI, the ingredients list are styled with spacing and square bullets. Okay, so instead of the regular bullets, we're using the square bullets. We've got margin bottoms between the elements, the list elements, and then of course our footer. All right, pretty nice. And again, you can of course pause the video as you need it, as I'm talking at any point during the discussion of the tutorial, or look at the code from GitHub. And now we've got example 5, our HTML table showcase. Okay, we're going to do that. We're going to make an HTML table showcase style to go along with it. Okay, HTML table showcase CSS. And of course, we are putting a link at the top. Okay, and then I'm going to paste our CSS. Okay, so here's the overall CSS. The table showcase now will look like, oops, that's not what I wanted. The table showcase will, oh, I'm looking at the wrong one, sorry. HTML table showcase will open it with live server. Doesn't look like it likes that. Oh, I put stable. Okay, that's why it's not picking up. So that's what the old one looks like. Okay, before the style, right? Not very interesting, kind of boring. Let's change the name here. I put stable accidentally. Okay, and there we go. and it should be linked properly now. Table showcase. And now, much nicer, right? Very, very nice. Kind of got a cool green color up here. It's you've got a hover effect when I go over the different rows here, right? So if I went to a website and it looked like this, I would probably trust it more. So it's not just about aesthetics. Sometimes it's about making your website not look like a flaming dumpster fire, so that people actually trust you more, rather than just basic HTML. So the CSS really, really, really makes a change. Now, there's a couple things we'll talk about in a moment. One of them is that, I think I'd mentioned it before, but you're really supposed to style tables using using CSS. So it's better to style them using CSS. We'll leave that for now, I guess. But we've got margin is 0, padding is 0, box sizing is border box. So most of this, again, we're familiar with. So we'll do the body, heading, or headers rather, sections. We're good with those. And when we get to the tables, you'll notice it's actually collapsing the border. So we really don't need the border. So it's in fact not good practice to have the border attribute anyway, because you're defining basically adjective, or what we would consider, what we would call presentational HTML. And that violates the separation of concerns, which is a software engineering principle where we want different parts of our program to take care of different things. So at this level, at this design level, the HTML should provide basic structure and content, and then the CSS should do the actual styling. Okay, so adding a border and things like that in the HTML is all we had access to before, and in fact, it was used in older HTML like HTML4, but it's now considered an obsolete technique in modern HTML5. So it could override or compete with the CSS styling, and it should be avoided in general. So here's our nice little table. Everything looks nice, and we've collapsed the border. We don't need it, and it looks great. Okay, so we've got width 100%, take up the whole thing. Margin collapse, or border collapse, that removes the spacing between cells, and then margin bottom is 20 pixels. Right, so the 100% causes it to fill the container, and then the border collapse just collapses and removes double borders and the default stuff, which we really don't like. The caption, we are styling this to show what side does the caption go on, the top in this case, making it bold font. Okay, so that's why we see this. Top laptops for 2025 looks kind of like a heading. It's the caption for the table. And then we're saying take the table headers and the table data, basically the cells, and that's going to add consistent padding and border to all the cells, okay, which is why we end up with this kind of grayish color around. The heading additionally has a different background color. You'll notice it's a distinct header background color from what we have elsewhere. It's still black font, the default body font, but we have this light gray color for the header. The other thing we've added, which is really cool effect, without JavaScript or anything like that, you can actually give it the effect of hover. So we use the pseudo class hover on any of the rows. So we're styling the entire row, table row, tr. Background color is this color right here, whereas the default background color is this just kind of the white. When we hover over it, it gives us this kind of light blue, right? It does not affect the TH at the top, but any of the actual table rows look like this, okay? That's actually, in case you were wondering, why don't we just use, THs and TDs all over the place? The TR is used for the specific table rows, and we can override previous behavior if we just use this hover. So footer is what you expect, pretty much align text, a slightly smaller font, gray, and then 30 pixel margin. Okay. So what's up next? Well, the next thing we have is our little portfolio mockup. Okay, there's our portfolio mockup. We can look at it using live server, and you know, fairly nice images, but it's kind of a boring web page. So we're going to fix this. So let's add a head, or add a link to the head rather. It's looking for portfolio mockup.css, which we haven't created yet. We're going to do that. Portfolio underscore mockup.css. Sure we spelled it right that time. And I'm going to, of course, copy my styles over. You clear it as usual. The body, we're saying Helvetica Neue. That is the font it's going to look for. If it cannot find that, it will use a sans serif font of some sort. Padding and background color as expected. Header. The big difference here, if we look at some of these, let's see here. Let's just start with this one. So main, you can see that it will lay out the project cards in flexible row structure. So we're not, even though we're not covering it in extensively how it works in this particular lecture, this is called a flex layout, okay, or a flex box. So this display flex tells it, hey main, you are a Flexbox layout now, or you're using a Flexbox layout. Flex wrap allows wrapping the space between the different cards. These are kind of an automated card system within the Flex container. That's called gap. And then justify content is tells us how to distribute the space between the cells, or the cards. And then if we go down here, each section, that prevents the cards from growing too large, and it supports responsiveness. So even without, again, using media queries and other things we'll take a look at, this is allowing this to be somewhat flexible and look decent on all sorts of devices. What does flex grow do? That allows the cards to grow and distribute space evenly within the row. Okay, the rest of these are pretty straightforward. I think the anchor we made a little bit different. That'll style it as a button. So instead of it just being a plain old anchor, instead of taking a button and making it a link, we've taken a link and basically made it a button. So we've made it inline block padding, or inline block rather, as the display. And just to clarify, we know if we put this as block, that it fills the full width of the container by default. So you can set the width and height. You can start on a new. It starts on a new line. Inline does not start on a new line. You cannot set the width and the height attributes. Inline block sits inline, but it behaves like a block element. So in this case, what it's doing is it respects the width and the height like a block element, but it doesn't start on its own line. So it kind of gets the best of both worlds if that's the effect you're looking for. So you can think of inline are good for like a word flow in the sentence. The block is kind of like the paragraph, takes the whole line or multiple lines. Inline block is kind of like a badge or a button. It sits in the sentence, but you can style it like a block. Okay, so it allows you to style it, but doesn't take up its own line. All right, so far so good. Let's look at what this looks like now. Very nice. Okay, and then if we adjust this, it's actually causing it to go in the different lines and try to take up a specific amount of space. You'll notice that, do you see how it does space between? That's because we told it this particular style up here is space between. That distributes the space evenly between these different elements. Okay, very cool. So it would be readable on a mobile device, and it has this responsiveness when I change the size of the browser. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so what's up next? Okay, only got a couple more. Pause the video, go eat a sandwich or take a nap if you need to. That's totally fine. But we're going to go up next to example 7, we're going to do the Hyperlinked Web Quest. So that's this one right here. I'm going to create a style, new file, so Hyperlinked Web Quest.css. And then inside Hyperlinked Web Quest. I'm going to put this here, and then I'm going to add this code to the CSS file. All right, so we reset the margins. The body, Calibri is the font that we want to use if it's available. And sans serif could be any font that doesn't have the serifs, as long as it's labeled as a sans serif. It'll try to find another available one, like Arial. We've got the header, as usual, kind of a lighter blue scheme this time. If we look at Hyperlinked Web Quest this time, okay, a little bit different style. A lot of these are looking very similar because this is a very common type of set of styles, especially when you're first learning. This kind of card style with it's coming out of the page look, so it gives it depth, is actually really, really common. Okay. All right, so we've got section, H2, UL, not much super different here. The anchor is styled to look like modern web links, so you've got blue bold text with no underline until you hover. So that's another effect that we achieve here just with HTML. So if I look here, do you see how it's actually kind of animating in almost? And it changes it to this different color when I'm hovering over any of these. Okay, pretty cool. So what that did is it has a transition color 0.2 seconds ease. That is what's causing that smooth hover effect. Instead of it just immediately turning the hover color, we're telling it when you're in the normal state without the pseudo class hover, when you're not being hovered over, all these things are true. And it has this kind of this trigger activated so that when you do hover over it, this is basically saying transition says, if the color is being animated, do it in 0.2 seconds and ease it in. So ease is the specific effect. So when we do hover, one of the things that we're doing is the color. We're changing the color. So this applies this transition and says, take 0.2 seconds to change it to that orangish color. Okay, so that's kind of the major one that we looked here. The unordered list, just as back up here, we made them circles. And then the transition on the anchor, again, is just for smoothing the color shift between the normal and the hover colors. Okay. Just another. Okay, so it goes immediately off, but on the way in, it actually takes a tiny, tiny bit of time just to make it look kind of cool. Okay, if I zoom in a little bit just so you can see it better, it's very, very quick. Now, you could change this if you want to do it. I wouldn't do this because it's probably way too much for most applications, but you see how it's taking way longer now? You could even make it, we'll say 3.5 seconds, 2.5 seconds. That's going to take a long time, relatively speaking. So it transitions between the current blue and that orange, right? It kind of blends them. So we can see what it's doing kind of in slow motion right now. When you go off of it, it is fading again. Okay. But it takes a really long time because we're saying it's 2.5 seconds. So over 2.5 seconds. But we don't really want that. We'll put it on whatever they had it, like 0.3, 0.2 is fine. 2 seems actually to me a little bit quick for this one, but that's good. Looks nice. All right, perfect. All right, that's it for that one. So the next one we're going to do is going to be example 8. That's the image gallery. So I'm going to open the image gallery. We're also going to copy the link at the top. And I'm going to, of course, add an image gallery CSS file. So it's called imagegallery.css. Not too surprising. Okay. And for this one, let me open it. or sorry, did it again, image gallery. We're going to open that with Live Server. Kind of cool. Very, very cool. It's got the nice card look here. So the figures have display inline block on them. Okay, if we look in the gallery here, most of this is pretty much stuff we've seen already. So the figure has display inline block. Again, that's so it can horizontally wrap the layout. We could use some Flexbox with this as well if we wanted to, but this is another way to achieve it for now. This adds kind of this card background color for white as we see. You got the white down here, and the image actually kind of zooms up to the size, or is contained in the entire size of this, except for the font, the text at the bottom. You've got text align center, of course, that'll center the image and the caption. The image full width within the figure, so within where it is, which happens to be within the figures. Rounded top corners, only to match the card style. So this is a left and now notice border top left radius. So instead of just border radius, it affects everything, which was the 6 pixels here. For the figure that the image is inside, this one's having it just do the top left and top right. Okay, so notice at the bottom, it's actually, if we zoom in here, it's rounded at the top on these, but square at the bottom. It's the little things that add these kind of really cool effects that make your websites look way better. Okay, and the next one is the business landing page. So let's do business landing page. I'm going to create a business landing page style. Business landing page.css. And of course, we are going to link it at the top here inside the head. I'm going to open up business landing page with Live Server so you can see what it looks like now. Very boring, but it has all the content we need, which is what HTML is good at. So what do we do? Well, we're going to add our CSS. Okay. So let's look at it, and then we'll come back and see what we're going to do with it. So a lot nicer, right? A lot nicer. Kind of this dark brownish color, some centered font with different sizes in the heading. Okay, the header. So we're using Roboto font or a sans serif if we can't find that. The big things that should stick out are so we're going to find it. Yeah, unordered list. So this makes the list type none. So it means that there's no bullets, so you can have a clean menu. And the padding left is 0. So this menu, these are list items, right? They're bulleted, quote unquote, list items, but they don't have an actual bullet. So instead of making it a circle or a square or anything like that, we told it none. All right, and then padding left, 0 padding on the left. So it's right up against the wall of its container, okay, except for whatever padding that has. The next thing, okay, these have, these are what's causing the padding. So you got 5 pixels on the top, bottom, and then left and right 0. Oops. You've got the font weight is bold. Now the href, the anchor right here, this targets emails specifically, only the email link, and it's styled to match branding. Okay, so any anchor tag whose href is set to the value mail to. So you might wonder, I guess I should mention this, you might wonder why does it have this caret symbol in front of the equals? Why doesn't it just say equals? Well, if we had equals, that means the entire href would be mail to. This means, with that little caret symbol, it's actually borrowed from something called regular expressions, but it's much simpler. We don't have as many options here, but this means starts with. So any anchor tag whose href starts with mail to, that means it's not starting with HTTPS or FTP or anything like that. If it's using mail to at the beginning and we hover over it, well, here we don't hover, here we hover, it'll select those. Okay. Now you could put $ equals instead of the caret equals. That would mean ends with, and you could do star equals means contains. Okay. So it's got some similarities with some of the ideas are borrowed from what we call regular expression, but it does basic, very, very basic pattern matching on attributes, the values of attributes. Okay, what else we got here? The font weight bold, we already kind of talked about that. The padding, what we expect, top, bottom, left, right. The footer, pretty much what we expect. This applies consistent styling and interactivity for the footer links. Oh yeah, the links at the footer. That's our other thing. So the privacy policy has a link at the bottom. So if you want to do that, this doesn't actually go anywhere. It goes to the same page, but you can add that if you need to. Now the mail to, this makes the text decoration underlined for the mail tos. So when I hover over the info@beanbros.com, okay, maybe an actual website, I don't know, so be careful. But don't worry, it's at, I don't think the phone number or the location is true. I don't know that there's a Brewtown, USA, or a Java Street. There may be, but I figured they'd have a state in it otherwise. All right, so now we have our final example. So this is our HTML quiz template. For this one, I'm going to put, again, a link at the top. And if we want it, we better make sure that that CSS exists. So HTML quiz template.css. Make sure I typed it right. And let's look at it with live server first. Fairly boring, but it does have, a quiz here. Submit quiz doesn't go anywhere because, it's calling the action, but there's not really anywhere to go. Let's see what we can do with the CSS that I made previously. Okay, so we've got the clearing as usual. A font family is Arial, sans serif if it can't find it. Got kind of a lighter grayish color, very light, or off-white rather. Not really a gray, off-white. Header is kind of a purplish color. H1s have extra margin bottom. The quiz form has a white background. Let's see what this looks like, just to get an idea. So there we go. A little bit nicer, right? So we've got these right here. I would probably adjust those, but they're pretty nice. Margin bottom, 20 pixels. The input type radio button, we're giving it a margin of 8 pixels. Okay, add space between the radio and the label. It doesn't look quite the way I want it, and it's not even matching what it says it's doing. I think it's because I didn't update the HTML. But let's do it a different way. So one thing we could do, okay, I off-screen created a little bit of label update here. So one of the things we could do is this. So we'll make it a flex. And the other thing we could do, like if we look at it right now, I don't know if it's going to look too pretty. So not too pretty. But the other thing to make it actually function properly is we could make all of these labels. So let's take this top one here. So I'm going to take the label. I'm going to, let me see here. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so we don't actually need the for anymore. I'm going to take the label. The BR should be okay still, I think. And then the input, I'm going to actually put it inside of here above that. Okay, let's see if this actually looks reasonable. Yeah, there we go. So see how it's straight across from it? Okay. Just off screen real quick, I'm going to update the code. All right, here we go. Here's what the update right here. All right, so got it updated here, which it'll be in the updates. So the only thing I really did was for each of the labels, instead of keeping it separately, you don't need the for attribute anymore because the input is inside of it now, and along with this text. So even though it looks like it's below it here within the label, this will, it's inline, so this will actually show up next to that. Okay, so it's a little bit nicer, and we don't need the for anymore. So it looks pretty good. And the other thing I did was I uploaded this to use Flex layout, like we had seen before, and just add a little bit of a gap between them and align the items to the center. So let's look at that now. Much nicer, right? Much nicer. Okay, right. Still no submission because we don't have any JavaScript, PHP, or anything else going on. But hopefully that was reasonably useful. The only big difference, well, this wasn't really a big difference, but we've got input submit, input type is submit, the input type radio. This one was styling them with an accent color, which is why we got this kind of color here that's different, right? So do you see how they're purple now, right? So you can make these more of a purple color than the default, right? So default's just black. So you can change even the radio buttons, which is really, really cool. It really, really makes a huge difference on the websites when you create them. All right, so that's what I've got for you this time. Hope to see you in another lecture soon. Dr. J out.